Joining us now is Chase Iron Eyes. He is at Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota, and he is an attorney to the Lakota People's Law Project. Chase, great to have you with us.
Good morning. Good to be here.
We just heard from Karen Joseph in Canada talking about the serious abuse of Indigenous children in Canada. In fact, that has prompted the Secretary of the Interior here in the United States, Deb Haaland, who is herself Native American, to launch an investigation. These schools were established in the United States as well. In fact, some of them still exist in the United States. What can you tell us about what goes on at these schools?
I think that we are now finding out the depth and the gravity to which the United States and colonial corporate countries like Canada and the United States and other derivations of the British Empire and Western European Christian civilization have hidden from the world, have hidden from the public, the depravities, the mass graves, the massacres, and the internal overt policies of countries like the United States and Canada. For some reason right now, our children are unearthing themselves so that we can no longer ignore the genocide, the Holocaust that is the Indigenous Holocaust of what is now called the Americas. To this day, this has been denied by the occupying countries of our homelands, of our territories. And now, even though the colonial process has caused the indigenous people to adopt some of the imbalances of the Western Christian metaphysical reality, we are now struggling to come to terms with the truth. Even though the United States is illegally occupying our country because we entered treaties with the United States, they must now recognize the truth. If this country hopes to heal, if this country hopes to reconcile and survive as a nation state, as a republic into the future, it's not just the indigenous genocide and the indigenous Holocaust. It's also the transatlantic slave trade, which brought hundreds of millions of indigenous Africans to our continent. They are also here. They are also willing to rewrite the social contract, the fundamental archetypal agreements that we have with each other as human beings who were taught to call ourselves Americans, who were taught that Native Americans were extinct or that they were vanishing, and certainly that they were erased by all institutions of Western existence. So the truth can no longer be hidden, and we are finding this out in real time.
Chase, you have called for an inquiry and investigation, something modeled along the lines of Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission. You have proposed a Truth and Healing Commission. Are you still pursuing this effort, and how far have you gone with it?
Yes, sir. We are pursuing the effort in terms of President Biden, in terms of Interior Secretary Deb Haaland, who is the first Indigenous woman to hold a cabinet-level position in the government of the occupying United States. To be Indigenous in what is now known as the Americas mean that we have these different identities. And so we are pressing Deb Haaland. She is responding in kind. There is nobody better situated to handle the sheer magnitude of what has happened in this country. She has created the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative, it's known as, and she will begin to study the mass graves, the children's graves that are at these places they call schools. These were not schools. These were torture camps. These are concentration camps where our children, my grandmother, my grandfather and my mother went through unspeakable horrors at the hands of religious institutions, at the hands of nuns and priests. And so we want the United States to find out the truth, to not withhold the truth from us, from its people. We need to investigate all mass graves, all cemeteries, all records, all internal documents of the Department of the Interior, which still runs some of these boarding schools or residential schools as they are known. The Catholic Church is one of the largest landowners in what is now called the Americas.
Right.
They have done this, and we want the priests and the nuns, some of whom may still be alive. If we can prosecute Nazi war criminals at 90 years old, we can certainly find who did this to our children today.
If we look at the Canadian experience, the Canadian Commission recommended a list of 94 calls to action, if you like, but that was in 2015, and since then only 8 of those actions that they call for have actually been implemented, and they were focused on things like disparities in health, education, and criminal justice. Do you have any specific proposals here with the commission that you are proposing in the United States?
Yes, we are proposing that the church, the Catholic faith-based community, begin to hold itself accountable. The Pope Francis, Pontifex, has yet to fully appreciate what his organization, 1 billion people strong, has instigated against the genocide and the Holocaust that it is responsible for, and that it is still complicit in if it chooses to deny the truth. Being one of the largest and wealthiest landowners of our stolen land here in the Americas, the church needs to give land back to indigenous peoples, especially in light of the climate crisis that we find ourselves in today. That is not even to mention reparations for the harm and the horror and the ongoing intergenerational trauma that we experience today. I am communicating with the world in the language of my colonizer, of my colonial occupier. So we need to tell the truth in order for there to be a healing. And I fully expect the United States and Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and United States President Biden to be held to an account in this time of reckoning. We didn't choose for our babies to be unearthed, but they are coming to the surface, and with them comes the truth of the last 500 years of illegal subjugation and ongoing political, economic, and juridical subjugation of indigenous nations in our hemisphere. It is illegal. It is not right. What happened during the boarding school and residential school era has transitioned into the taking and placing of Native American children in violation of federal law in the United States. So this process and this has not stopped for us.
Chase, you know, the former United States President Teddy Roosevelt, whom I should add was educated at Harvard University, he once said, this is what he said, "I don't go as far as to say the only good Indian is a dead Indian, but I believe 9 out of every 10 are, and I shouldn't like to inquire too closely about the 10th. Have those kinds of attitudes, in your view, changed in the United States?
Absolutely not. You know, on a large scale, yes, but in the territories, in the parts of this country that overlay on, you know, our traditional homelands, our treaty territory, speaking of the Sioux Nation, the Oceti Sakowin, there is very much still a violent settler mentality that pervades the political and institutional spheres of states like South Dakota. You have a governor right now who threatened to breach our borders illegally and almost caused an armed conflict in 2019. This is happening when Donald Trump was the president of the United States. He gave license to this violent settler mentality that expresses itself in the proliferation of white supremacy or the attempted institution of white supremacy, which is crumbling from within. But when those institutions are breathing their last breaths, they will do anything out of their own fear and confusion to preserve those institutions. So that mentality has it's baked into the fabric. It's woven into the fabric of this country. The erasure and genocide of indigenous peoples. I mean, we're the rightful and righteous landowners here. So if I'm a Western civilian, the last thing I want to see is an indigenous person that knows what they are, who they are, and knows that they have superior sovereign rights related to mine as a settler.
Chase, we are going to have to leave it there. Time has caught up with us, but thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you again for inviting me.